On today's episode, we have 3 cars from February 1970. Detroit is at peak horsepower, throwing the biggest engines money can build at anything with 4 wheels. Chevrolet drops the most powerful production car it has ever sold. Plymouth unleashes a hand-assembled street brawler so extreme it actually came with a legal disclaimer. Nissan arrives from across the Pacific with something nobody saw coming. A sports car that made the entire Detroit arms race look like it had been missing the point all along. This is Four Wheels and Fuel, USA, Season 1, Episode 2. Here we go.
Introducing our tough one, the 1970 Chevelle SS 396. It's a great performer, except for one thing. No one gives it a chance to perform. Not that we can blame them. After all, there's a lot to admire about the new Chevelle SS 396.
Your car?
Hey, what's that?
A no-nonsense cowl induction hood you can order that actually feeds in extra air when you accelerate. Functional hood pins.
It's bobby pins.
No, these aren't bobby pin hood pins, baby. And they're for real hood pins. Yeah. Hey, 2 pipes. Get it for me, will you, buddy? Oh, now, come on. What are belted fiberglass tires, aren't they? Yeah.
Consider this fair warning. When you order your Chevelle SS 396 at your Chevy dealer's sports department, expect to draw a crowd, no matter where you take it.
Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454, February 1970. The muscle car war has been building for 6 years, and Chevrolet has just thrown the nuclear option onto the showroom floor. The Chevelle SS 454, fitted with the LS6 engine, is the most powerful production car General Motors has ever sold to the American public. 450 horsepower from the factory, 0 to 60 in just over 5 seconds, a quarter mile in the low 13-second range. In 1970, that was supercar territory, full stop. The story starts in '64, when Chevy introduced the Chevelle as a sensible mid-size option. Nothing flashy, the kind of car a responsible adult might actually buy. For the next 5 years, it sold reliably and quietly, which meant the engineers back in Detroit were growing quite bored. By '69, the muscle car wars between Ford, Mopar, and GM had turned into an arms race with chrome bumpers. Chevy decided the Chevelle deserved the biggest gun in the entire arsenal. The LS6 was the result. A 454 cubic inch V8, solid electric camshaft, aluminum intake, and an attitude problem that started it idle. Chevy officially rated it at 450 horsepower, but road tests kept returning numbers that suggested the factory was being deliberately conservative. Nobody complained. The cowl induction hood pulled cold air directly into the carburetor at speed, meaning the faster you went, the more power you made. Detroit logic at its absolute finest. Under the body sat a heavier-than-ideal frame, rear drum brakes, and suspension tuned for straight lines rather than corners. This was not a canyon carver. You pointed it at the horizon and pressed the gas. Corners were somebody else's problem entirely. Inside, it was still a basic Chevelle. Vinyl seats, a column that vibrated at idle, gauges drifting into the red, and enough room for the whole family if you didn't mind deafening every single one of them. Chevy built roughly 4,500 LS6 Chevelles for the model year. Insurance companies noticed immediately. Premiums for young male drivers were already painful. The LS6 made them genuinely catastrophic. Some owners quietly removed the SS badges before renewal time, hoping their agent wouldn't ask too many questions about what was sitting in the driveway. The LS6 Chevelle is now one of the most collectible American cars ever built. It cost around $3,500 new. Today, a numbers-matching example changes hands for well over $100,000. 1 year of production, no successor. The emission standards arriving in '71 made absolutely sure of that. But Plymouth had already prepared an answer that made 450 horsepower look almost reasonable by comparison.
What is it?
What is it?
What is it?
What is it?
Asking the question doesn't make it. Driving the answer makes it. Plymouth makes it.
Plymouth Hemi Cuda. If the Chevelle was a sledgehammer, the Hemi Cuda was a scalpel wrapped in sheet metal and handed to someone with no interest in subtlety. Plymouth launched the Barracuda back in '64 as a sporty fastback on a compact platform. By 1970, they had completely lost all interest in polite. The Barracuda became the Cuda. The E-body platform gained a genuine muscle car proportions, and the 426 Hemi engine option made it the most feared streetcar Plymouth had ever offered at any price point in its entire lineup. The 426 Hemi was not a regular production engine by any reasonable definition. It was a racing engine that Plymouth had agreed, under considerable regulatory pressure from sanctioning bodies, to make available to the general public. 2 4-barrel carburetors, hemispherical combustion chambers, and an official rating of 425 horsepower, though anyone who drove one back-to-back with the factory figure understood that number was being deliberately and knowingly conservative. 0 to 60 in about 5.5 seconds. Quarter mile in the low 13-second range if the rear tires actually hooked up on a public road, which was never guaranteed under any conditions. Plymouth required every Hemi Cuda buyer to sign a disclaimer acknowledging the 426 was a race-derived engine not designed for everyday street use. The buyer signed it anyway. Everyone signed it. That was part of the appeal. The shaker hood scoop was the visual signature. It bolted directly to the engine block, piercing through a hole cut in the hood, moving visibly with every rev. At idle, it trembled noticeably. At wide open throttle, it shook hard enough to rattle the insulation loose from underneath. The whole car communicated its intentions before you ever touched the accelerator. Plymouth offered the Cuda in colors named Limelight, Vitamin C, and Tor Red. Subtle was not the intended demographic. Inside, Plymouth gave you high back bucket seats, a pistol grip Hirsch shifter for the 4-speed manual, and a full dashboard of large round gauges glowing amber at night. The cockpit felt purposeful rather than comfortable. Nobody buying a Hemi Cuda was thinking about long-distance touring comfort or trunk space. Only 652 Barracudas received the 426 Hemi engine in 1970. Low production combined with the Hemi badge makes these the most valuable Mopar muscle cars in existence today. A matching numbers example in a desirable color has sold at auction for over $3 million. Plymouth stopped offering the Hemi after '71. The Hemi Cuda was the loudest possible statement Detroit could make that February. Then Nissan walked in with something that changed the entire conversation.
The 240Z, a new kind of economy car from Datsun.
Datsun 240Z. In February 1970, most American buyers thought they understood exactly what a Japanese car was. Small, economical, dependable in a thoroughly forgettable way. Good on gas. The kind of car your accountant recommended on a Monday morning and your friends quietly pitied you for driving every Friday night. Nissan had been selling the Datsun brand in America since the early '60s, building a steady reputation on compact sedans and small pickups that competed entirely on price and practicality rather than any meaningful form of desire or excitement whatsoever. Then the 240Z arrived on American dealer lots, and Nissan rewrote the entire assumption in a single decisive move. Under the long, sloping hood sat a 2.4-liter inline-six, producing 151 horsepower. On paper, that number looks modest beside 450 from Chevy or 425 from Plymouth. but the 240Z weighed approximately 2,300 pounds. Power-to-weight math told a very different story entirely, and the Z won that calculation convincingly and without any real difficulty. The chassis was purpose-built for handling rather than straight-line theater. Fully independent suspension at all four corners, front McPherson struts, rear struts, a long wheelbase for genuine stability through fast corners. You could carry real speed through a curve at a rate that would send either American muscle car straight into the guardrail without hesitation. Road testers that year kept reaching for words like balanced and responsive and precise in their published reviews. Nobody had applied those words to a Japanese car before in any American publication. Nissan gave the Z a driver-focused interior that felt genuinely European in both character and execution. Twin circular gauges positioned directly ahead of the driver, a three-spoke steering wheel, bucket seats that held you properly in place through corners taken at speed. Every single control fell naturally to hand without searching. It felt like a car engineered by someone who drove purely for genuine pleasure. The styling came from the Nissan design team, with input from German designer Albrecht Goertz, the man behind the BMW 507. The long hood, the fastback roofline, the clean, uncluttered surfaces. It looked exotic at a price that absolutely was not. At $3,526, the Z went directly against the Mustang and the Camaro. Nissan sold 17,000 240Zs in the American market during the first model year, exhausting inventory so completely that dealers charged over sticker and buyers paid without argument. No Japanese car had ever done that before. The 240Z permanently changed what American buyers believed a Japanese automobile was genuinely capable of delivering. February 1970, Detroit is loud, Japan is winning quietly, Chevrolet shows no restraint, Plymouth shows even less, and the 240Z proves neither of them was really paying attention. Hit subscribe and tell us which one you would take home. This is Four Wheels and Fuel USA, Season 1, Episode 2. See you next time.